You think you're in love, that they're different, special. That's why you ignore the countless red flags. But in reality, they're not special. They're just triggering one of the most powerful systems in your brain, and you're mistaking it for love. This is day 1 of decoding the human brain. The mechanism is called intermittent reinforcement. It's one of the strongest forms of behavioral conditioning known in psychology. When rewards are given unpredictably, it creates a far stronger dopamine response than when they're consistent. Your brain starts craving the next hit, not knowing when it will come. This is the same pattern used in gambling machines. Your reward system doesn't care if the input is love or a slot reel. What matters is the unpredictability. That's why consistent partners feel boring, and unstable ones feel intoxicating. You stop judging the relationship logically. You just chase the next high. If you see it that way, you will realize they were never your soulmate, that they are nothing special, and that you probably wouldn't even like them if they wouldn't exploit this technique. Now the magic disappears, and the only thing that is left is an ugly addiction. And just as you stop going to the casino to quit gambling, you need to cut contact to fight this addiction. Because you don't like them, you just like the inconsistency they provide. Ever notice how you mess things up right before it finally starts working? You ghost opportunities, miss deadlines, pick fights, or lose focus right when success is within reach? That's not bad luck or mood. It's an old mechanism in your brain sabotaging you. This is day 2 of decoding the human brain. It's called the upper limit problem. Your brain has a subconscious ceiling for how much success, love, or happiness feels allowed. Cross it, and the brain's fear center, the amygdala, fires, as if you're in danger, not because there is a real threat, but because you're changing. That shift threatens your identity. You start feeling like an imposter, like it's too much, or not really you. That's cognitive dissonance, your old self-image clashing with your potential. So your brain does what it always does under threat. It restores balance, even if that means wrecking everything. What you need to do is to increase the threshold. You have to make clear to yourself that you are deserving of everything, that you are allowed to be the happiest, the most loved, and the most successful person in the world. Make it part of your identity, otherwise your own brain will never allow you to change, to become better, to become the person you always dreamed of. Have you ever wondered what actually happens in your brain when you're terrified before a speech, an exam, or a hard conversation, and then go completely blank even though you were perfectly prepared? This is day 3 of decoding the human brain. In that moment, your brain goes into fight or flight mode. It doesn't see a test, it sees a threat. Your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for memory and complex thinking, gets shut down. The focus is now on our instincts. Because in the face of danger, recalling facts is irrelevant. All that matters is survival. This instinct kept our ancestors alive. Today, it just blocks your mind when you need it most. You've probably heard it before. Visualize your audience in their underwear. But it actually works. People in underwear are instinctively perceived as non-threatening. That way, your brain doesn't enter fight or flight mode, and you regain access to your memories. Nothing feels as good as praise. When you feel valued and someone tells you how good you are, you think it motivates you to do the things you love. But in reality, it causes you to lose your entire drive. This is day 4 of decoding the human brain. When we do something we enjoy, we do it out of intrinsic motivation. That motivation comes from within ourselves. But if we keep getting a reward for it, whether it's praise, money, or recognition, extrinsic motivation from outside is added. When this happens again and again, we start linking the reward to the action. We no longer do it because it's fun, that would be intrinsic motivation, but because we want the reward afterward. The motivation becomes completely extrinsic. This also means that as soon as the reward disappears, we lose all motivation. We no longer enjoy the activity itself, only the reward we use to get from it. To prevent this, you need to do 3 things. First, separate the feedback phases clearly from the actual work process. Second, shift your reward focus to effort rather than results. Third, define your own standards instead of relying on external measures like grades, money, or status. This way, you keep control over why you act and prevent your drive from fading when external rewards disappear. No matter how disciplined, competent, or smart you are, you will never achieve anything, and the reason is simple: the program of your brain doesn't let you. This is day 5 of decoding the human brain. Every one of us carries an identity, an internal program that shapes who we are and how we behave. Think of it like a computer's operating system, directing our actions through a set of deeply ingrained instructions. These instructions are built from what others have told us, our personal experiences, and the beliefs we've formed. When a part of this internal program convinces you that you can't do something, your brain will do everything to turn it into reality. The problem is that most people aren't even aware this program exists, and what doesn't exist can't be changed. The smartest and most talented person in the world, if burdened with a negative self-image and a limiting program, will always achieve less than a so-called failure whose program tells them they're the best. Because it also works the opposite way. If your program tells you you are the best, your brain will do everything to turn it into reality. The good news is, you can rewrite your program to force yourself to achieve everything you want. In Unbeatable, I show you how. Link is in my bio. The reason you are overwhelmed by your emotions and why you can't control them is way more simple than you think. You just can't name them accurately. This is day 6 of decoding the human brain. It's called emotional granularity. The more accurately you can name the emotion you're feeling, the better you can control it. The main driver behind emotions is the amygdala. Whether it's negative emotions like fear or positive ones like love, activity happens there. The amygdala's counterpart is the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for logic, complex thinking, and rationality, exactly what we need when our emotions spiral out of control. Neuroscience shows that when you clearly and precisely label your emotions, you activate the prefrontal cortex and reduce activity in the amygdala. That's how you regain control over your feelings. If emotions remain vague and undefined, your brain interprets that uncertainty as a threat, triggering more anxiety and confusion. Precise labels, however, create safety, turning threats into manageable data. For you, this means learning vocabulary just like in school. Get familiar with your feelings, observe them closely, learn to describe them exactly, and you unlock the ability to control your emotions instead of being controlled by them. You can't admit it, not to others, not even to yourself, but you are a narcissist. Deep down, your mind revolves around only one thing: yourself. This is day 7 of decoding the human brain. Narcissism isn't binary, it's a spectrum, and whether you like it or not, you're on it, likely higher than you think. Biologically, the brain's default state is self-referential. It evaluates everything through one filter: my status, my image, my needs, and my value. Everyone is self-focused, that's not the issue. The danger begins when that focus becomes an addiction. When your self-worth depends on how others see you, when you crumble when your ego isn't constantly fed, and when you need to matter, always. And the worst part, you don't even notice it. The problem isn't wanting attention, the problem is denying that you do, but at the same time needing it to function. If you want to escape that, you need a stable self-image that isn't dependent on external validation and can't be changed by it. And to build that, you must first confront your narcissistic and ego-driven traits, because what remains hidden will always control you. Only what you expose can be mastered. All of your memories are lies, every single one of them has been distorted to match how you feel. That's why, when you're in a bad mood, it suddenly seems like the whole world is against you. But there is a way to break that cycle. This is day 8 of decoding the human brain. The effect is called mood-congruent memory. The part of the brain responsible for memory is the hippocampus. But it doesn't work in isolation, it depends on cues to activate and filters what gets retrieved. Your brain has stored millions of memories from nearly every moment of your life, but you don't need all of them all the time. So your mind filters, and certain cues determine which memories are brought to the surface. One of the most powerful cues is emotion, which is processed by the amygdala. When you feel unfairly treated, the amygdala sends this emotional signal to the hippocampus, which then activates that filter. It starts scanning your memory for events that fit that state. These selected memories reinforce your belief, intensifying the emotion and creating a vicious cycle where emotion and memory constantly strengthen each other. So the next time emotions take over, remember, what you're seeing is a filtered snapshot, not the full truth. With that awareness, you can break the cycle, you can switch the filter, and use your memories to steer your emotions in the direction you choose. The reason you never try again after you fail once is because your expectations triggered a protection mechanism in your brain that automatically shuts down any new effort. This is day 9 of decoding the human brain. The greatest pain comes when we look forward to something and then don't get it. The more we invest in that expectation, the greater the pain. That's because dopamine isn't released by the outcome, but during the anticipation. When reality aligns with prediction, you feel pleasure, but when it deviates, dopamine levels crash. And that gap between what we expect and what actually happens is what we experience as pain. And because this pain is so intense, the hippocampus stores it as a memory. Your goal and the effort caused pain instead of a reward. And every time you set a new goal with expectations, the hippocampus recognizes the pattern, and your subconscious will do everything to stop you from even starting, just to avoid the dopamine crash. That's why your expectations need to become hypotheses. It's no longer about achieving something, it's about observing what happens. The dopamine release is now linked to learning, and no matter if your hypothesis is accepted or rejected, you learn. This process gets rewarded, and your brain starts supporting you trying over and over again. When your actions don't align with your beliefs, you don't act differently, you change your beliefs. That's why smokers keep smoking, gamblers keep gambling, and why you will always find an excuse not to work on your goals. The secret is called cognitive dissonance, and there is a way to finally break that pattern. This is day 10 of decoding the human brain. Cognitive dissonance is a psychological phenomenon where you feel discomfort when your behavior doesn't align with your beliefs or values. Your mind can't handle the tension, so it needs to alter either your beliefs or your actions. And it always chooses the easier route. If you are lazy, it takes way less mental effort to find an excuse than to actually do something productive. So the mind stops seeing what you do as laziness and instead reframes it as a break or a reward. The tension is solved, your brain is happy, you don't need to change, and you stay average forever. Because the brain always changes what's easier to change. Your goal should be to make the wrong action as hard as possible to repeat. If you're a gambler, ban yourself from every platform. For you, surround yourself with people who won't tolerate your excuses. Put yourself in environments where your old behavior isn't just discouraged, it's unacceptable. That way, the cost of maintaining your behavior becomes so high that your brain will finally choose to change it. Every time you tell yourself you need just a little more preparation, a little more time, a little more knowledge, your brain is sending you the best signal you could ever receive. This is day 11 of decoding the human brain. The feeling of needing just a bit more before taking action is a survival mechanism. Your brain, specifically the amygdala, is hardwired to protect you from anything it perceives as a threat. It doesn't distinguish between physical danger and psychological discomfort. It treats both the same. And change is pure psychological discomfort. Because every time you change, a small part of your old self dies, which conflicts with the brain's primary task, to protect you from death. It channels this protection into excuses, that you're not ready, that you need to learn more, that it's not the right time. But you're not unprepared, you're not underqualified, your brain just doesn't want you to grow, it wants you to survive. This mechanism is nothing more than a signal. Until now, you thought it meant you really needed more time, more research. But the opposite is true. This signal shows you that now is the right time to act, that you are evolving. If what you were about to do didn't change you, your brain wouldn't resist it. So treat these excuses as a compass, because every single one of them is a sign that you're on the right track. The reason your fears and doubts always seem so much stronger than your dreams and goals is because an ancient mechanism in your brain fights on their side. This is day 12 of decoding the human brain. It's called loss aversion, which states that the pain of losing $100 is about twice as intense as the pleasure of gaining $100. Evolutionary scene, losing resources could mean death, while additional gains were optional. But it doesn't just apply to resources, it applies to everything, including failure and rejection. We assign utility points to every possible outcome of our actions, but our loss aversion distorts the scoreboard. You overvalue every possible negative outcome, regardless of the real risk. Even when something would be objectively better for you, you don't do it, because the theoretical chance of losing something, no matter how small, outweighs the gain. To counter this bias, you need to realize that not taking action is a loss too. If you don't start your business now, you're losing the money you could potentially earn every single day. The same applies to every other goal you have. Every day you wait, you lose all possible gains you would have achieved if you had acted. This mental shift evens the score and finally allows you to overcome your doubts and fears. One unanswered message can ruin your entire day. Your mind is so focused to get that one response that you can't concentrate on anything else. The movie industry uses the same principle with cliffhangers and open endings to keep you hooked and mentally engaged. It's called the Zeigarnik effect, and you too can use it to never procrastinate again. This is day 13 of decoding the human brain. The Zeigarnik effect states that unfinished tasks stay longer and more present in your brain. That's because the brain hates tension and craves closure. When you now start something and don't finish it, you create tension and don't get closure. Your brain will try everything to finally find that closure, draining so much of your mental energy that you can't concentrate on anything else, making your brain obsess over unfinished things, just like an open ending in a movie that you can't stop thinking about. So, always have an open task. Don't finish with milestones, finish in the middle of the work. That way, it's way easier to go back to it, since your mind was already thinking about it the whole time. You can't even procrastinate, because the unfinished task is always in the back of your mind. This way, you force yourself to actually do the things you should do, because that's the only way your brain gets relief from the tension, and finally reaches that long-awaited closure. The reason people always hurt and disappoint you is because you don't really know a single person. Not your best friend, not your partner, not even your parents. You think you do, but what you know is a projection your brain has fabricated. And that projection is heavily biased and will always disappoint you. This is day 14 of decoding the human brain. You never see someone in every moment, every situation, or know the full depth of their thoughts. At best, we grasp about 50% of who someone really is, but our brain struggles with incomplete information, so it starts filling in the gaps on its own, creating an image that feels whole and right, but is completely shaped by our own biases, assumptions, and wishes. And it is exactly this half that will always disappoint you. If we like a person, we can't admit that they have flaws. That's why we ignore negative traits and project positive ones they don't even have. We create a version of them that is far better than reality. What inevitably happens is that the real person acts differently, worse than your projection. And whenever reality undeniably doesn't match with your expectations, you feel disappointed. But it is never the person's fault, it is your own. The person acts just as they are, your projection was simply wrong. Knowing this, which traits can you think of that you constantly project onto others? You call yourself a good person, but in reality, you just hide your dark parts so well no one can see them. The rage, the envy, the ego, the lust for control. You locked them away and started calling yourself good, but the more you suppress them, the louder they scream. And eventually, they will take control. This is day 15 of Decoding the Human Brain. Carl Jung called this the shadow, everything your conscious mind refuses to see, the traits you suppress to be loved, accepted, and rewarded. But what you exile doesn't vanish, it becomes autonomous. Over time, it will leak into your life through passive aggression, addictions, even self-sabotage. Every time you get emotional, your suppressed shadow is coming to the surface. And you can't have peace or pursue goals while fighting yourself, because all the energy you spend suppressing your darkness is energy you don't have for your dreams. That's why you're exhausted, not from life, but from the war inside of you. So, study your darkest thoughts, and trace your shadow to the roots. Once you can name its parts, integrate them into your character, channel them where it uses you. Use your aggression in sport, your dominance in business, and your vanity in art. Because only when you stop rejecting parts of yourself can you finally act as one, and only unified minds can evolve. You don't have morals, you have conditioning. The voice in your head telling you what's right or wrong, what's acceptable or not, is not your conscience. It's obedience, installed into your mind, and now it secretly controls every aspect of your life. This is day 16 of Decoding the Human Brain. Sigmund Freud called it the superego. It's the internalized voice of parents, teachers, religion, society, anyone who ever told you what's good or bad. It's built from every command you ever followed as a child. And now, even when no one's watching, you punish yourself for stepping out of line. The superego rewards you with pride when you conform and punishes you with guilt and shame when you don't. That's why you feel guilty for resting, or selfish for setting boundaries. Because the superego isn't interested in your well-being. It's a surveillance system, implanted in your mind to keep you in line. And the more blindly you follow it, the further you drift from who you really are. Until you wake up one day and realize, you lived your whole life trying to impress a voice that was never yours to begin with. If you want real freedom, you have to kill that voice, replace blind guilt with real values, break rules that don't align with your truth. Because as long as you mistake obedience for goodness, you'll never know who you really are. There is one secret thing you need to do to never regret a decision. It's called the 10-10-10 method, and here is how it works. This is day 17 of Decoding the Human Brain. Every time you face a decision, pause and ask yourself, how will I feel about this in 10 minutes, in 10 months, and in 10 years? Only after that you make the decision. It's a deceptively simple tool, but one that's almost perfectly tailored to the way our brain works. Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman described the dual system model of thinking. System 1 is fast, intuitive, energy efficient, but prone to biases and errors. It's responsible for tasks like recognizing faces or reacting instantly in a conversation. System 2 is slow, deliberate, and logical. It handles complex tasks that require real thinking, like solving math problems or planning for the future. Ideally, you want System 2 in control when making important decisions. But because it requires significant mental energy, we often default to System 1, leading to impulsive, emotionally driven, and poor decisions. The 10-10-10 method forces a shift. It overwhelms the automatic responses of System 1 and triggers System 2. It slows you down, pushes you to analyze, and forces you to reflect exactly what you need for a good decision. Your brain can't differentiate between what's real and what's not, making your mind a double-edged sword. One side is a superpower, the other programs you to lose and keeps you small forever. And without knowing it, you've been using the wrong side every single day. This is day 18 of Decoding the Human Brain. When you imagine a situation vividly, like failing or embarrassing yourself, your brain treats it as real. The same neural circuits activate, the same stress hormones are released, the amygdala fires, cortisol spikes. Repeat this often enough, and your brain starts wiring failure, fear, and insecurity into your identity. And worse, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making and self-control, gets overridden by these loops. You train your brain to be anxious, and you rehearse weakness neurologically. So use the other side of the sword. It works the same way. Visualize yourself being calm under pressure, winning, giving the performance of your life, and solving every problem. And again, the same neural pathways will fire as if it actually happened. You train your brain to become the person you imagine. Over time, you strengthen the existing pathways that make you strong, and create even more, until you become unbeatable. So which side of the sword do you want to use? Every time you're running fake arguments, replaying old pain, practicing comebacks in the shower, or just daydreaming, you activate one of the most important systems in your brain, the so-called default mode network. Shut it down in the name of productivity, and you're making the biggest mistake of your life. This is day 19 of Decoding the Human Brain. The default mode network activates when you're not focused on an external task. It runs during rest, introspection, and imagination, what people call daydreaming. It links regions of the brain to construct autobiographical memory, simulate social situations, and mentally model your future. In short, it maintains your sense of self. When it breaks down, identity starts to dissolve. That's why researchers find DMN disruptions in Alzheimer's, where memory collapses, in depression, where self-reflection becomes toxic, in autism, where social simulation is impaired, and in schizophrenia, where internal narratives fall apart. Your brain works like a muscle. Neglect it and it weakens. If you're constantly busy, always chasing the next task, and never giving yourself time to think, and for your daydreams, your DMN atrophies. So if you never hear yourself think, don't be surprised if one day, you no longer know who that self even is. There is a way to eliminate all your fears, to build unshakable confidence, to stop overthinking, to kill bad habits, and to learn anything faster. You just need to reprogram your brain through neuroplasticity. This is day 20 of Decoding the Human Brain. The structure of your brain isn't fixed, it's fluid. With every action and every thought, it either strengthens, weakens, or creates new pathways and connections. If you start to learn to play the piano, at first you don't know what you are doing, every movement is clumsy, but with repetition the brain prunes the inefficient paths and reinforces the ones that work. Over time you can play automatically. Your non-piano player brain becomes a piano player brain. The same principle applies to fear, confidence, bad habits, learning, and overthinking. What you constantly do gets wired into your brain. Every time you fear something and don't do it because of that, your brain becomes more fearful. But if you act despite this fear, your brain rewires these paths, making it easier the next time. Over time, you won't even feel the fear anymore. The same applies to everything you do. It is basically fake it till you make it. Act as if you were the person you would like to become, and soon your brain will make you exactly that person. 3 things accelerate the change in your brain: novelty, emotional intensity, and repetition. There's a way to make your brain believe anything. That you're confident, disciplined, fearless, even if it's not true. And it works on everyone else too. The secret is called the availability heuristic. This is day 21 of Decoding the Human Brain. Your brain constantly scans itself for proof. If you tell yourself, "I'm confident," your mind instantly searches for examples to validate or reject that claim. If it finds none, it calls bullshit. But if it quickly recalls even a few, it assumes it must be true. This is the availability heuristic. The easier something comes to mind, the more true, frequent, or important it seems, regardless of whether it actually is. Every day, write down evidence for what you want to believe. List every moment that points in that direction, no matter how small. After a few weeks, your list will be so long your brain can't help but instantly retrieve examples of your confidence. And the faster it finds examples, the more deeply the belief hardens. This works for any trait. Just feed your mind an archive of proof until the identity feels real. And if you want others to believe something, give them so many examples that their brain has no choice but to accept your narrative. Drown them in evidence until it feels obvious. Because truth, to the brain, is just what's easiest to recall. When someone cuts you off in traffic, you think they're an asshole. But when you do it, you were just in a hurry. This invisible bias ruins relationships, kills empathy, and makes you worse at understanding people. It's called the fundamental attribution error, and you're making it every day without knowing it. This is day 23 of Decoding the Human Brain. The fundamental attribution error is your brain's tendency to explain other people's actions by their personality, but your own actions by the situation. When someone else fails, they're lazy. When you fail, it's because the circumstances were hard. Neurologically, this is a shortcut. The brain craves coherence, and it's easier to label someone as rude than to consider their boss just screamed at them or that they're rushing to the hospital. The bias comes from our limited access. We know our own backstory and intentions, but we only see other people's actions. So we assume character instead of context. So, next time someone messes up, pause and ask, what else could be going on? And don't just excuse your own behavior as situational. Take responsibility. This way you not only give you the chance to improve your own flaws, but also get a way more peaceful life and way better relationships with less conflicts. There is one thing everyone is addicted to, and no one is interested in you, because you are the complete opposite. And the secret is a secret. This is day 24 of Decoding the Human Brain. Secrets create a psychological imbalance. The brain hates unfinished information. That tension activates our reward system, specifically the dopaminergic circuits responsible for anticipation. Secrets feel like puzzles, and puzzles demand resolution. That's why people are drawn to conspiracy theories, cliffhangers, and confidential leaks. The illusion of hidden knowledge creates perceived value. The less accessible something is, the more our mind inflates its importance. Our attention is not drawn to what matters most, but to what feels just out of reach. To what demands a little bit more attention, a little bit more effort, and a little bit more mental energy. It makes us invest, and we instinctively start to like the things we invest in. What most people do wrong is oversharing. They're completely transparent. When there's nothing left to discover about you, when you leave no space for others to wonder or imagine, you simply stop existing in their minds. Without that curiosity, you generate neither attraction nor interest. That's why you shouldn't reveal everything and leave room for interpretation. But don't overdo it, because the biggest creep is the one who tries to be mysterious at all costs. There are two kinds of people in this world, politicians and scientists. Most people are politicians, and that's exactly why they'll never do anything meaningful with their lives. They cling to being right, even when they're dead wrong. And that mindset kills growth before it even begins. This is day 25 of Decoding the Human Brain. Politicians want to be right. They form an opinion, then bend the world around it to protect their fragile ego. They don't search for truth, they search for validation. And when reality hits back, they break. Scientists are different. They want to know what's right while assuming they're wrong, and they test everything. They fail on purpose to gather better data. They don't attach their identity to an idea, they attach it to progress. That's why scientists evolve and politicians decay. If you want to evolve, be a scientist. Treat every belief, every goal, every strategy like a hypothesis. Try it, fail, and improve. That's how humanity climbed from playing with sticks and stones to flying to the moon and connecting the whole world through the thing in your hand. Simple trial and error until you have no other choice but to succeed. And stay the hell away from politicians. They'll waste your time with pride, noise, and excuses. Your habits are the single most decisive factor deciding in which direction your life will go, if you achieve greatness or stay a loser. That's why I will show you the science-backed way to destroy bad habits and build the habits of the elite. This is day 26 of Decoding the Human Brain. Your brain is lazy by default. It normally does what consumes the least amount of energy. It takes what is called the path of least resistance. If bad habits are easier to do than good habits, your brain will take the route of the bad habits. The easiest way to change that is to make changes to the path, representing your environment. James Clear established 4 rules to achieve that. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. For breaking bad habits, the rules apply in reverse. If you want to build the habit going to the gym, you start by packing your gym clothes the night before, and place the bag next to your door. It's a visual cue your brain can't ignore. Then, you pair it with something you enjoy. Maybe you allow yourself to listen to your favorite podcast only while working out. And don't aim for a 90-minute workout, start with just 2 minutes. And the last rule, track the workout, cross it off a calendar. The small reward gives your brain dopamine, which will reinforce the behavior. You can apply this blueprint to any habit, and I mean any. Now, write the 4 rules applied to the habit you want to build or destroy in the comments. If you can't think of any, let the community help you. If you're drowning in tasks but can't start a single one, it's not because you're lazy or lack discipline. It's a psychological phenomenon called cognitive load theory, and here's how you fix it. This is day 27 of Decoding the Human Brain. Cognitive load theory explains that your brain has limited working memory, a kind of mental RAM. When it's full, performance collapses. You get distracted, make poor decisions, forget what you were doing. Most people live in a state of chronic overload without realizing it. Every app, task switch, and mental loop, like worrying or overplanning, eats into this bandwidth. Unlike a computer, you can't upgrade your RAM, so the only solution is to optimize usage. Elite performers do exactly that. They reduce mental clutter to preserve focus for what matters. Here's how to fix it. First, reduce extraneous load. Eliminate unnecessary decisions. Lay out your clothes, plan meals, and batch tasks. Second, limit intrinsic load. Break down complex tasks into smaller ones. Don't write the report, write the intro. Third, increase germane load. Focus your limited attention on meaningful challenges that grow your skills. Use tools like the Pomodoro technique. Externalize thoughts with pen and paper and design your environment to remove noise. The goal is simple. Remove the junk so your brain can finally perform how it was meant to. You don't want the truth. You want to be right. Once you've said something public, even if it's now clearly wrong, you will defend it with everything you've got, just to avoid looking stupid. This is day 28 of Decoding the Human Brain. Behavioral psychology calls this the commitment bias. Once we publicly commit to something, an opinion, a goal, or a way of life, we feel a deep internal pressure to act consistently with that commitment, even when the evidence changes, even when the decision is clearly wrong. Why? Because inconsistency feels like weakness, like a crack in identity. So instead of adapting, you rationalize. You defend bad habits, toxic people, and outdated goals, just to stay consistent with your past self. This is exactly why people defend terrible politicians they once believed in, or have opinions that don't even make sense anymore. But you can use the bias deliberately by making public commitments to the things you actually want. Say out loud who you're becoming, post your goals, and declare your new standards. Your brain will now fight to act consistently with that identity. And most importantly, train the ability to break false commitments. Just because you said something in the past doesn't mean it defines you now, because growth means inconsistency. There is nothing worse than stating facts and showing evidence in a discussion, only for the other person to completely ignore it and become even more sure in their wrong opinion. That happens because you trigger a psychological bias, the so-called backfire effect. To change someone's mind, you need to bypass this effect. And here is how. This is day 22 of Decoding the Human Brain. The backfire effect is a cognitive bias where presenting someone with information that contradicts their deeply held beliefs doesn't open their mind, it triggers the opposite. The brain's defense mechanism kicks in, doubling down on the original belief to reduce cognitive dissonance and protect identity. Neurologically, this is survival wiring. Challenging core beliefs feels like a threat, so the brain reacts with increased certainty, not doubt. This bias explains why debates, politics, or personal arguments often escalate instead of resolve. If you want to change someone's mind, never tell someone they are wrong. Instead, plant subtle doubts. Use stories or examples they can relate to, and link your perspective to things they already believe, to their already existing identity. Always appear to be on their side. And for yourself, every time you react emotionally to something that challenges your belief, be aware that it might actually be facts the backfire effect wants to protect you from. Nothing you do will ever work, not your business, not your goals, and not your movement, until it sparks emotions. If what you are doing right now doesn't, it has the same value as doing nothing. Because people don't act because of logic, they act because of emotion. And the two most powerful drivers are love and fear. This is day 29 of Decoding the Human Brain. Emotion is the engine of action. Neuroscience shows, when the emotional centers of the brain are damaged, people can still think, but they can't make decisions. Rational arguments might convince someone, but only emotion makes them move. Love and fear are evolution's strongest motivators. Love drives us to protect, pursue, and build. Fear keeps us alive, alert, and away from pain. If your message, your business, or your mission doesn't activate one of them, it will always get ignored. Marketing understands this. Imagine a mother buying medicine. You can either show her the consequences of not acting, illness, pain, and guilt, or you speak to her love, how this product protects what she values most. And if you want to change your own habits, attach your goals to love, who you want to become, who you want to protect, or to fear, what it will cost you if you don't. Emotions are the cause of action. If you don't trigger them, nothing you will do will ever matter. You don't understand your brain. That's why work feels like pain and TikTok feels like heaven, and it just takes 3 minutes to fix it. This is day 30 of Decoding the Human Brain. Your brain doesn't judge in absolutes, it compares. The nucleus accumbens, your brain's reward hub, evaluates everything based on expected dopamine release. That's why grinding through a task feels painful right after scrolling social media. Your dopamine baseline is too high. It's not that the task is hard, it just loses in comparison. This is how the relative reward system works. Your brain tracks what brings pleasure and win. When you constantly flood it with instant gratification, normal life feels numb, boring, empty. And that's why you procrastinate. To reset this system, you have to lower the bar. Every morning, before you touch your phone, before you speak, before you move, sit with no stimulation. No input. Just 3 minutes of silence, eyes open, zero action. This trains your brain to stop expecting constant dopamine spikes from the moment you wake up. It reintroduces stillness, boredom, and emptiness. In comparison to looking at an empty wall, doing your actual tasks will feel like a reward instead of punishment.